Hello and welcome, Exiles, to the build that got me to level 96 in the Gauntlet before I died right as I was about to do some endgame bosses and try to put some points on the board. Now, I want to talk about first what I died to, and then I want to talk about the tech that allowed me to make this jug extra tanky. And I think it's actually very, very strong. It's something that I didn't know existed, so I'm going to share with you guys. But to start things off with, what did I die to? Essentially, one of my few upgrades I had left to do was get a decent anointment on an amulet. And for that, I needed to get Sovereignty, which costs 3 silver oils. I had farmed roughly 1 silver oil, and I got this Blight Ravaged map. Now, Blight Ravaged maps are an 85 zone, which, according to the Gauntlet mods, made it have the Uber Boss mods, which made it Ziri start doing attacks on me whenever I was anywhere near the vicinity of a unique monster, along with 80% damage, gain Fizz's extra chaos, or so a few other mods that are pretty dangerous. The point being is, my whole plan with the Blight Ravage map was basically, I'm just going to stay off screen. I'm going to build the towers going to kill the bosses, and I'm just not going to be near any danger. That was the plan. Unfortunately, what ended up happening is 2 bosses at the very end were not dying to my meteor towers. I had not gotten a good variety of towers, though certain bosses there are basically like immune to the meteor towers, and so they weren't dying, they were just stuck there. And so I was trying to like upgrade some towers, like jump in, upgrade a tower, have it hit it. Ultimately, what I should have done is just walked away and just lost those lanes of loot because I had finished all the other lanes that had all been done. But essentially, at one point, I had upgraded the ice tower to a bad version of the tower that didn't really freeze lock the boss. And the one boss started moving forward on me. And instead of just running off screen, which is probably what I should have done, I decided to run back to get over to here. Because I didn't know for sure if there was still a boss locked over here or not. I didn't know. I think they were all cleared out on that side, but I couldn't know for sure. The point is, I decided to start running back through. Now, you'll notice, yeah, I think this is pretty much cleared over here. I probably would have been fine if I just ran that way, but I decided to run back through. And what ends up happening is, this boss from off-screen shoots a big projectile at me, and I don't know what the AoE is on these things. I don't know if they shotgun. I'm assuming they probably shotgunned. I don't know what the AoE is on them, because there's additional proj. There's a +4 proj mod on the Uber fights. But essentially what happened here is, no! What did I die? My character had like, I don't know, 300,000 armor without flask up, about 350k, something like that. I didn't have any of my flasks on. I didn't have Molten Shell. I didn't activate it. I didn't see the attack coming. I didn't react to it at all. But if I had just been leap slamming through, I obviously wouldn't have gotten hit. Or if I Molten Shelled, I might have survived. But the reason this thing hit me so hard is essentially, you'll notice at the very start here, right there, I get cursed with Poacher's Mark. And I don't know if this is some dirty combo or what it is, but I guess that boss cursed me with Poacher's Mark, and then through the attack, a literal split second later, you can see the projectiles coming in from off screen, and that's the reason I died. And the reason that killed me is Poacher's Mark essentially makes you have reduced physical mitigation. So when I have 350,000 armor, most attacks are just reduced by 90%. That's a heavy reduction. When I have a Poacher's Mark on me, that reduces my fizz reduction by 20%. So it almost triples physical damage, and these projectiles are half fizz, half fire. And I'm thinking that's probably why I died, is probably because of Poacher's Mark. But ultimately, it is a Blight Ravage map. That's a modifier of 80% monster damage. They have AoE. They have, I think, Gain is extra, but maybe I'm crazy. No, Gain is extra might only be on the red maps, but still, 80% monster damage is no joke, and it heavily makes a difference in terms of how much my damage is mitigated. So point is, I probably died because of Poacher's Mark, but not 100% sure. I was being a little bit stupid, a little bit greedy. My whole motto the whole time I was playing this character was, play like a turtle, go slow and steady, and just see what progress we can make. And I think there was a good chance I could have taken this character all the way to doing probably all the invitations but feared, and maybe a couple Ubers. There's a couple I think I have enough experience with that I think I could have played around. I have enough tank mitigation where most hit-based mechanics I can tank quite well on this character. And let's get into the defensive layers. But that's how I died on the character. Bit of a bummer because I was so close. I just gotten a King of the Mist kill, which means I got that 4th point. So I was about to equip Bark Skin, which is very, very strong in a boss fight for an armor stacker. But let's get into it. How is this character made? What is the defensive layers? Now, the new thing that I learned this league, that I believe there was a patch for this, and I can show you this real quick. Let me cut to that. All right, I found the patch notes. This is in 3.21.0c, so I guess this was back in maybe Crucible League. I'm not 100% sure. But you'll see here it says, fixed a bug where the armor from equipped body armor is double stat was not doubling the evasion from your body armor when Iron Reflexes Keystone was allocated. Now, previously, I always thought as a Juggernaut, you had to have an armor-based chest piece to double the number you got from it. But actually, apparently in that patch, that all changed. Now, somebody from Twitch chat, before I launched this Gauntlet character, made me aware of this. They said, hey, I'm doing a Juggernaut armor sacker. I'm using an evasion chest piece. This is how it works. And then they linked me to this patch. So that's thanks to, I think it was APF in Twitch chat. So shout out to him for letting me know about this. But essentially what that means is, number one, Zodiac Leather is a higher base chest piece than a Glorious Plate. You can roll these things to north of 4,000 evasion, whereas a Glorious Plate just barely gets over 3,000, if that makes sense to you. At base, you have a larger number to work with. And number two, you can use Grace perfectly with synergy with Iron Reflexes along with Determination to great effect. What this means is essentially, when you have a Grace aura, you'll see it says 30% more evasion. What that means is this base evasion from this chest piece is getting multiplied by that evasion multiplier from Grace, however much aura effect you have. And then when you have Iron Reflexes and you have the Determination, it is multiplied again by Determination's more multiplier, which is, I think it's like 50% more or whatever it is. Yeah, 50% more. And then if you have a more aura effect, it obviously goes up. Now, why is this important or why is this powerful? Well, you'll notice on my character, I currently have about, well, I guess my auras are all unequipped because I just died. A little embarrassing there. Don't look too long and hard. Oh, I know what's wrong here. This is only saying 200k. This should say north of 350,000. And the reason is, we were playing with the Wildwood Ascendancy, which no longer exists because I'm in Standard now and I'm not in Ziz's Gauntlet. So essentially, I'll go through the idea. The idea was have the body armor empty, and you will use the Oath of Magi node, which makes your body armor double its defensive mods if you have a empty sockets. You don't have any gems in there. So essentially what was happening is I would get it doubled by that, and then with the Juggernaut node, I would get it doubled again by Untiring. So what ended up happening is you would get 4 times the amount of the base stat you have on your chest piece. So with a 3,600 evasion chest piece, I was getting close to 14,500 base evasion, which then got multiplied by Grace, which then got multiplied by Determination, and all my armor scalars. So what ended up happening is the end result was, even though I had a character that didn't have a Mage Blood, didn't have very good gear, was in SSF, and I was grinding the hardcore Misery Gauntlet, I could get a very large armor number. I actually had, when, you know, my flasks were up, right now this is not going to be accurate, it says I have 470,000. In the Gauntlet League, I would have, with all my, if I just had hit an enemy recently, I had my flasks on, I was looking at 800,000 armor, and then I was planning to get the Sovereignty Anoint on my amulet, which would have allowed me to run Barkskin, which probably would have taken me north of 1 million armor without really good gear, just SSF stuff I was able to put together in this Gauntlet run. Now, granted, we've played a decent amount of time, but it was a real slog with those Gauntlet mods. It made everything super dangerous, made me play super careful, and a lot slower than I would have, or anyone else would have to in a normal softcore trade environment, so to speak, because you could get so much things so much easier. For example, getting yourself some silver oils would be a matter of a few minutes of farming versus, for me, the silver oil was something that I had been grinding a lot of. I was getting impatient, and that's why I risked the Blight Ravage map and got my character killed. Now, on top of all that, the tree and the plan for defenses was built around having this large armor number. The whole idea was, if I have an armor mastery that makes my armor apply 10% to chaos, and then I have Unbreakable from Juggernaut, which makes my armor apply to 8% of elemental, then if I equip Divine Flesh, we will have some pretty good mitigation. Now, with what I was going to end up having, which was close to 1 million armor, that'd be roughly 80,000 to 100,000 armor that applies to hits to elemental or chaos. Now, if it's a physical hit, there's just not any physical hits in the game that hit hard enough for that to matter. The only thing that matters is if you get hit with Overwhelm, or in my case, I died to Poacher's Mark, which reduces my PDR or reduces the amount that armor can mitigate by, in which case you're just kind of screwed. I don't think there's ways to get around that outside of just building into Fizz Taken As, where if you're doing Fizz Taken As, it's like, why do you have all that armor anyways? It feels a little weird, right? But anyways, the point is, when you do Divine Flesh, and why this is so effective for mitigating big hits on a lot of different fronts, is because the way armor works is, the armor compares the number it has to the number of the hit you are taking, and then it reduces proportionally depending on how much it is. For example, if you want to reduce a hit by up to 90%, which is the maximum armor can reduce a hit by, you need to have something like 45 times the number. So if I take 1,000 damage, if I have 45,000 armor, it will reduce 900 of that damage, so it'll only hit me for 100, if that makes sense. Now, the reason Divine Flesh is important in this setup is it splits the damage. Like, say I get hit by 5,000 cold, it splits it into 2,500 cold and 2,500 chaos, which ends up meaning I have to have basically half the amount of armor to mitigate by 90%, because it splits the hit in half and it's defending against 2 smaller hits. I have one that's being defended against 10% of my armor. So if I have 1,000,000 armor, 100k is applying to the 2,500 there, which 2,500 is about 1/40th or so of 100k, which would mean I'd roughly mitigate close to 90%. And then if I get hit by the elemental portion, which is like 80k of armor, or maybe I'm reducing it by 80% or whatever that number is. Point is, Divine Flesh doubles the effectiveness of your armor when you're splitting up that hit and making it smaller. So the idea was I'd have all this armor, and if it was a fizz hit, I have a bunch of armor, it's going to mitigate it. If it's an elemental hit, it gets split in 2, and I mitigate it equally kind of on both portions, but it reduces the amount of comparison because it has that number being split in half. And if it's chaos, well, I have +5 max chaos res, and most chaos hits don't really hit that hard and generally aren't too dangerous. I wasn't really worried about chaos. Generally, Divine Flesh here, and when it comes to those hard-hitting Ubers, is really concerned about the bigger elemental hits, like an Azeri Flame Blast, like a lot of Exarch's fire abilities, a lot of Exarch's, or a lot of Eater's like lightning abilities, stuff like that, the things that hit pretty hard. The idea was to split those up, mitigate it that way, and it also helps against pen. For example, a lot of the Uber bosses have elemental pen. That was the whole idea there. Now, this is a great defensive layer, and this is ending up being the reason I was able to cozy my way through a lot of various dangerous mods and survive as long as I did. Unfortunately, I ended up dying to my own foolishness and doing a 85 Blight Ravage map. I'm not too experienced with Blight. I don't know how it works, but so that was kind of a mistake on my end. I also on this character have full suppression cap. You'll notice on my defenses we have 100% suppression. I did, for that Blight map, respec a couple accuracy nodes just to give myself a bit more suppression, which I was going to get on gear. You'll notice I don't have a single piece of suppression gear on my chest, on my character at all. I essentially only needed one piece with a high suppression roll, which I was working in crafting, which would have allowed me to not need any of these 3 points here. But this is just a temporary solution for the problem that I was going to swap into when going into those late stage bosses. The offensive layers are essentially going to be precise technique, and then I was going for Impale, and I was going for the Splitting Steel of ammunition. You have to do an alt version in the Gauntlet. Splitting Steel, I think, is ultimately better on default because if you scale a bunch of attack speed, it just feels better to play. That being said, the Steel of ammunition makes you have additional splits, and it makes the AoE bigger, so it's easier to shotgun and overlap. Ultimately, with my character's attack speed, it's probably a similar. You could go one way or the other. I think ammunition was maybe a little bit stronger for me, but the second you start really investing into a character, get a bunch of attack speed, then ammunition falls off, and regular Splitting Steel is just better because you don't have to worry about Call Steel at all. Because without Call Steel, you'll notice we're just throwing one projectile out. You need those steel projectiles to do it. So the idea was pretty simple. Scale a bunch of armor for percent damage scaling. Splitting Steel has a decent amount of flat damage. Dream Feather has some okay flat damage, not really great. And then between those two things and getting some okay impaled chance, I was going to go fizz-based impale with return proj, and then if I'm standing next to a boss, all those projectiles would come and shotgun the one enemy. I don't know what exactly my damage was at the time of me dying. People have told me it's somewhere between 3 million-ish, I don't know. And then I have some pretty crazy defenses. My regen was essentially about 1,300 base regen, and then if I Enduring Cry, I get regen there. And then every 4 seconds, I get regen based on how much armor I have, so that's why you see it goes up to 5,000 right there. So between this mastery, Untiring, which would, if enemies hit me with Fizz, I get regen, and Enduring Cry going off, I had some fairly decent base regen rate stats. So that was my idea, and then I also had Leech. That was my sustain mechanics, that was my defensive layers. I think this is a very strong way to build a Juggernaut. Ultimately, if you're looking for a budget armor stacker, I think this approach works pretty well. And I'm probably going to decide, not probably, I am planning to make an actual build setup in softcore to showcase this build, but with a little bit more gear behind it when I can still have access to Oath of Magi just to showcase it. I will say in the future leagues, we're not obviously going to have Oath of Magi. Probably it's not going core. My guess would be there's going to be some new power creep of some different flavor. whatever that is, I'm sure there will be some ways to apply it to this build to make it stronger. And ultimately, if you take away Oath of Magi, you lose some of your armor, which is complete overkill mitigation for the normal game. I was playing with the assumption of doing Gauntlet. Obviously, the mods are much more dangerous at base. So you'd lose half your armor, so you'd lose some of your mitigation, you'd lose some of your percent damage scaling, but you would end up picking up an extra 2 links, because I'm playing with essentially just a 4 link right here with a couple of levels, which the levels are helpful. They do give you a bit more base fizz, but ultimately the the ability to have a 6 link will pick you up back some of that damage. So I don't know where it lands exactly. Anyways, this is the character I made in the Gauntlet. I'm not going to I can't really showcase it because it put me in solo self-lound league, which I don't have any. It just took whatever. I don't even have any of the maps from the character I was doing, so I can't really showcase it. I guess I could try to like go and yoink some of the maps, but I'd have to log in, make a character to kill Hillik, and worry about it. But I'm not gonna worry about it. But anyways, that was the idea on the character. That's how it went when I did the Gauntlet run. This is the Lance Snacks on the competition. I was hoping to place well for Juggernaut. Ended up throwing on the end. Really embarrassed about it. But for only I think it was either my 3rd or 2nd time playing a hardcore character ever, I think we did pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. And maybe in future Gauntlets, we'll try to come in with a little bit more of a game plan going into it and have some fun and maybe try to be a bit more competitive. This one, I was just winging it the entire time. If you were watching me streaming it on Twitch, you would have known that on day 3, I had swapped into a character that was basically not operational. I tried to swap into, right when I got my first replica Dream Feather, I tried to swap into like a Shield Crusher the Chieftain, and it was just terrible. But we fought through and see where we go. Anyways, I'm gonna end up making a follow-up video that actually like has a good setup going in an Affliction League to show you what this character's potential is in a softcore environment when you actually can buy some decent gear pieces. That's my plan. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it on Twitch while we're streaming it. And then yeah, we're gonna follow up with making a setup in Affliction League, where we actually have the ability to trade and acquire some good pieces. Hopefully you enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching. Take care, Exiles, and peace out.